Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you've joined us for our very first webinar with Reverend Margaret Marcuson. I'm Stacy Emerson, the new Stewardship Facilitator with ABC USA Mission Resource Development, and I am also pastor of the Union Baptist Church in Mystic. If there's anything that I can do to assist you in your stewardship ministry, just please let me know. Today's webinar, How to Lead in Stewardship, Raise Money with Less Stress, will be led by Margaret Marcuson, who works with churches wanting to create a ministry that lasts, and clergy who want to have more impact on the people they serve best. She speaks and writes on leadership and works with church leaders nationally as a consultant and coach. Margaret's most recent book is Money and Your Ministry, Balancing the Books While Keeping Your Balance. Margaret is an American Baptist minister and was the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Gardner, Massachusetts for 13 years, but now she lives in Portland, Oregon. Margaret, I thank you so much for your leadership and wisdom today, and I'm going to turn everyone over into your hands.
All right, thanks so much, Stacy. All right, well, some of you may have been on these webinars before, but I've got a couple of slides that will just show you what your screen ought to look like. Everybody is muted, but you can type a question. If you are on the phone or would prefer to use mic and speakers, you can make a choice there, and you can type in questions by that question panel. And then you can raise your hand there to the left of the question box if you have a question, and there'll be a number of times when I'll be asking you to share as we go along. Again, we're talking about money, raising more money with less stress. The purpose of this webinar is to help you think some new thoughts about the ministry of stewardship. And I've got some things to share, but I want you to think some of your own thoughts, and so I'm going to be inviting you to write at several points. So I'll ask you to grab something to write with and something to write on as we go forward. I want to, first of all, do a little poll so I can find out a little more about who's on the call today. And this will be a poll about your role. And I will ask you to click on what your role is. So far we've got 50-50 pastor regional ministry. We have almost everybody voted. We've got a couple more seconds to finish up. And everybody's voted, so we've got 50% pastor, 29% regional ministry, and 14% other, which I assume could be lay ministry or other interested parties. Okay, so thanks so much for voting. That gives me an idea of who we're talking together with today. And let's go on and talk about stewardship and about money. You may have heard the phrase that money does not go on trees. This is actually proves that wrong. This is an image of a money tree. In England and in northern England and Scotland, people over the centuries have stuck coins into trees for good luck. And to me, this is a tremendous sign of hope, that people believe that there could be enough for them. Howard Anderson, an Episcopal priest and stewardship leader, says we get very confused about the difference between God's economy and the world's economy. In God's economy, there is always enough. And to get a sense of this, you just have to look around yourself. I hope wherever you are, you're getting spring. I know we are in Portland, and we get a sense of the bounty of God's creation and all that is available for us. So I want to talk today about enough in several areas related to stewardship and resources in church life. Enough thinking, enough leadership, yes, enough giving, and finally, enough celebration. So first of all, let's talk about enough thinking. It's hard to think clearly about money. Money is hot. It's like a light bulb turned up high. This image is of a work of art. It's called Special Edition Silver Dollar. It was on sale in a New York art gallery some time ago for about $100,000. Might still be available if you are interested. And but I think it's a good image of what happens to us when we talk about money. It's almost like those light bulbs are flashing. Or, as one pastor put it, there always seems to be an exclamation point when money is involved. I think getting more thoughtful about money, finding a way to think about it, is like having a dimmer switch to turn down the intensity at least a little bit so we can be calmer, clearer, and maybe even have more fun with it. So I want to share a few ideas from the work of Murray Bowen and Edwin Friedman, who Bowen was one of the founders of the family therapy movement, and Edwin Friedman was a rabbi who applied these ideas to congregational life. And there are a couple of variables that they talk about that I think apply to money. The first variable has to do with anxiety. We just get anxious about money, and anxiety has been described as a response to a real or imagined threat. It's a response to a real or imagined threat. Now, we get anxious about money, I think, because we need money to survive. We have to buy food to keep ourselves alive. And so we can get caught up in the fight, flight, or freeze response, just a biological response our bodies have, when you're in that budget meeting and your heart starts to pound. And so churches end up in fights about it. Or some pastors avoid it, or want to talk about money as little as possible, preach no more than the required one stewardship sermon per year, or we just don't quite know what to do about the money challenges that we face. So the second variable is maturity. How grown up are people and are our churches as we have these conversations about money matters? It's not just about age, but sometimes as we get older, we do have a little bit more wisdom. We've seen a lot of stewardship campaigns, but it's not just about age, because some older people are less mature than the younger people in our congregations. But in relation to money matters, we can see varying degrees of functioning in relation to raising money, spending it, planning for the future. And typically, you can imagine the churches and individuals that are less mature, they just have more money problems. They make poor decisions about money. They have more fights about it. They're more concerned about other people's opinions about it. And people who are more mature, they're just not so worried about it. They make better choices. They have fewer relationship problems around money and fewer actual money problems, I think. And I think churches that are better functioning have a sense that, no matter what is going on, we're going to be able to handle it. We'll be okay. We'll figure it out together. So there are a couple of other family systems ideas that I think can help us have enough thinking about money, get more thoughtful about it. Another one is the concept of triangles. So here's one example of a triangle where a couple of people, the girls are whispering to each other and somebody's left out. Sometimes this happens in church in money matters, where only some key people have the information and they keep it a secret from the rest of the congregation. Sometimes only one person has has the information. There are some other key triangles that pastors can be in relation to money. I mean, this basic one is the pastor with the people and their money. And so we think what we want to do is control this relationship that people have with their money. And the basic rule about triangles is you cannot control this other side of the triangle. You know, people are going to decide what they're going to do with their money. You can influence it, but you cannot make them or will them to give more or make any other choices about money. So the rule about triangle is you work on the relationships that you are a part of. So, you know, you work like crazy to connect with people where they are from a place of acceptance. And you continue to clarify and say what you think about money and what your principles are about giving and about a faith relationship with money. Pastors also can be in a triangle with the board and the stewardship committee, you know, who may have different views of how money matters are handled in congregational life and how stewardship should be taken care of. And maybe you can think of some others. We'll have a time for sharing in a moment. And you know, maybe that you may have other triangles in your particular situation that are affecting your stewardship ministry. Just a couple more ideas. One is over and under functioning. This is the idea that some people take too much responsibility and others don't take enough responsibility, and there's a balance between the two. And in stewardship, this may have to do with just the balance in terms of giving. I think in many congregations, you know, 10% of the people are giving 90% of the money. Some people are over-functioning, others are under-functioning. In some churches, as I said, all decisions are about money or about stewardship are made by just a few people. And there are pastors in ministry who under-function in relation to money. The lay leaders are over-functioning, and the pastor isn't really stepping up because, you know, he or she feels anxious or doesn't quite know what to do about it or just doesn't like dealing with it. And there's multi-generational process, the history of a church and its money life. This is the church I belong to, the First Baptist Church of Portland. This is an old picture, but it doesn't look that much different today. A few more buildings around it. And this church took 17 years to become self-supporting when it was founded. That's a long time. And there is this persistent sense in our church that there is not enough, even though we have, you know, downtown property, foundation, reserve funds. People just can't quite believe that there's going to be enough. That sense of scarcity got laid down right at the beginning, and it is still hanging around. Finally is societal anxiety. So I don't have to tell you that we've been in an anxious time in our culture around money matters over the last 5 years, more than 5 years now. So we get caught up in that. We get infected by the anxiety that's in the media. Our church members bring it into congregational life. My husband is a librarian, and he found a book on the shelf some time ago called How to Survive the Coming Economic Crisis in 1975. And then a little further along the shelf was How to Survive the Coming Economic Crisis, 1980. And just about every 5 years, there was a book telling people what to do about the disaster that was about to happen. So that it comes in waves, and we've been in a pretty long wave now. Maybe things are a little bit calmer now, but people are still a little bit skittish about money. So these are some basic systems ideas applied to our life with money. And so I want to invite you now to think about your own church or your ministry setting. And what do they do? What do you notice that they do in stewardship or money in general, whatever first comes to mind. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes of silence to write something about that, and then we'll have an opportunity to share. So just write for 2 minutes. What do you notice? And I'll just say, if you're watching this webinar or listening, I invite you to the recording. I invite you to do these exercises as well. All right, that's 2 minutes. I would love to hear from a few of you about what your church does in stewardship or money matters. You can just click on the hand to raise a hand, and Bridget will unmute you.
Let's see, we have a comment from John. John says, money is one of the ministry tools used to fulfill the mission to which God has called us. How we use money is a reflection of our relationship with God.
I think that is absolutely right. And I'll be talking a little bit more about how critical it is, I think, to talk about money more often.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Hi, this is Patty Stratton.
Hi,
And
Patty.
my husband is actually the pastor of the church where we are now, but I'm also a pastor, just not here. And this congregation is using money by withholding it because they are trying to make a point about some issues that they want to make. So it's kind of being used as a weapon here, and it's pretty uncomfortable at the moment.
Yeah, it's been known to happen. Thanks so much. All right, well, let us go on then and talk about leadership. Enough leadership. Leadership is a critical part of leading of stewardship, and I think the pastoral leadership in particular is really important for stewardship. So this is Jesus in the temple. This is a stained glass window from a church in England, and he's exercising one kind of leadership in relation to money matters in church. Vision is one critical element of leadership, and I've heard vision described, or one approach to vision, as being thinking about what do you want. Now, as spiritual leaders, we are discerning what God wants, but I truly believe that God works through our desires, and thinking about what we want for the ministry of our church. And it's an ongoing question and discernment that we can all consider really every day, every year, and over the years. One approach to vision that someone suggested is to create a 30-year budget. So when I first heard this, my jaw dropped, because most churches are happy if this year's budget balances, never mind 30 years. It's really about it's not about a prediction. It is about a direction. So if you have a sense of what you want to be true in your church, I mean, after you're gone, that can give you ideas on what to do now to help make that happen. Now, I have to be honest and say, so I've been working on a 30-year budget for myself personally, up to about 10 years. I'm finding it's a challenge, but it really requires you to think through what your priorities are and what you want to be true financially. So vision is a key part of leadership and stewardship. And secondly is decisions, leadership in the decision making, because churches make decisions about money all the time. They make decisions about budgets. They make decisions about what approach to take to stewardship. They make decisions about buildings, and they make decisions about staffing. So we're involved in these conversations about decisions all the time related to money. And I just want to suggest some things to pay attention to in approaching these decisions, which may be specifically about stewardship or maybe be decisions about other money matters that have implications for stewardship. So first of all is just define self. So you think about what you want and say it out loud. One of my colleagues says that it's important to say, here's what I think. Here's what I'd like. Sometimes pastors are in fact reluctant to say what they think, but I think it's a critical part of pastoral ministry. Next is to stay connected, to work on relationships. And this is really important no matter what your role is. A music minister that I know was talking about how she works on her relationships with the money people. It's a very large church, and she just pays attention to that. And I think whatever your relationship is with your treasurer will benefit the money ministry of your church and the stewardship life. Even if you're never talking about money, a good relationship will pay dividends. Secondly, or thirdly, function not over functioning. So you're taking responsibility, but you are not taking responsibility for everything. So one pastor felt like he was taking too much responsibility for his little church, and he felt like he wasn't sure whether they could actually continue to support a full-time pastor. And so he just said to them, I'm going back to school. I want to be your pastor. I think our future is bivocational. And he just let go of trying to see that their church could continue to sustain a full-time ministry. Well, lo and behold, as he let go, people said to him, Pastor, you're different. Your preaching is different. And he said new people came, there was new energy, their biggest giver died, and new people made up the difference. So there's something about letting go of what you're not responsible for that can actually create room for some new possibilities. Make decisions at the right pace. Anxiety can cause churches to make decisions too quickly, or anxiety causes churches to make decisions too slowly or to avoid decisions. So I know churches are sometimes quick to cut the budget if the stewardship results aren't what they should be. And maybe there are other options. I'm not saying don't cut the budget, but don't rush to judgment, or encourage people to take time, and also encourage them to make decisions that need to be made, not just to avoid them. And there are times in stewardship leadership to take a stand. I heard of one church that was about to engage it in its first real stewardship campaign. They'd never really had an organized campaign. And the two biggest givers said that if you carry this out, we will pull our giving. So the pastor and the leadership consulted, and they just decided, you know, we're convinced we need to do this, and we are going to go forward anyway. During the stewardship sermon, these individuals sat in the congregation with their arms crossed, and they did actually pull their giving, and yet overall the giving results still met that church's goal for that year. So that there are no guaranteed outcomes when you take a stand like this, but I think it is better for a congregation to have reduced giving than to allow someone to hold the church hostage. Sometimes it's a lay leader who can take a stand. You know, one church was about to cut all of its mission and education budget. And at the congregational meeting, a layperson got up and said, this is not the kind of church that I want to be a part of that has these priorities. It is slashing mission and education. And in fact, the church reversed its decision. They still had to deal with the budget gap, but they were more in line with their priorities. Right, well, I want to invite you now to think about your church or your ministry and what do you want? What do you want for them in relation to money and giving, or just what do you want in general? I invite you to write for 2 minutes. All right, that's 2 minutes, and I would love to hear from some of you. What do you want for your church? So just raise your hand or type in the question box.
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hey, yeah, so the answer, what do I want for my church, for
Yeah.
my ministry? More than anything, agency.
Uh-huh.
So the ability to act is what I want.
Yeah. All right, thanks so much. Can you tell me your name?
Sure. My name is Alex Pickens.
Okay, great. And where are you from?
I'm from East Lansing, University Baptist Church in East Lansing.
All right, thanks so much. All right, I'd love to hear from somebody else. What do you want for your church?
Margaret, this is Stacy.
Yes.
Thought I would chime in. Hi.
Please. Please.
Hi. I would love for my church to sense that quote that you started us with at the beginning, that in God's economy there's always enough, that they would sense that first and foremost, and that everything else was sort of secondary. That when we first go to what God has already given us and blessed us with, the rest of it can, with some guidance, work itself out, but you have to start there.
Yeah.
That God is full of grace and abundance, and we are blessed first and foremost.
Great. Thanks so much. All right. Is there somebody else? I'd love to hear from you. What do you want for your church?
Margaret, this is Patty again.
Yes.
I would love for my church to be sustainable. And I just want to thank you for the illustration you gave about the stewardship campaign and the big givers that didn't want to give. That is really inspiring to me. It helps me look at this idea of church members withholding for their own reasons, whatever that may be, in a whole different light. That illustration reframed it for me, so thank you for that.
All right, thanks so much.
And Margaret, this is Bridget.
Yeah.
We have a write-in from George. George says balance and healthy communication.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, George. All right, well, thank you so much. I love hearing from you and hearing your ideas and your thinking. I really think that we can have, continue to have new and creative ideas about how to lead in the ministry of stewardship and to fund ministry as we go forward. So I want to go on and talk now about sort of where the rubber meets the road, and that is enough giving. That's what we all want. We want enough giving, enough money for ministry, however it comes in, but particularly enough giving. And I want to share with you this image of the widow's mite. It's a painting by Tissot, T-I-S-S-O-T, a French painter, and I love this image, and it never occurred to me that the widow who gave her mite might have been young and had a baby. And the other thing I love about this image is just the work that Tissot did and his story. So he was a society painter. He made a lot of money painting rich people in Paris around the turn of the century, the 20th century. And after he made a lot of money, he decided he had enough to do what he really wanted to do, which was to paint biblical scenes. So he painted 100 images of the Old Testament and 100 from the New, and they are just stunning. But even apart from their beauty, it says to me that when you have resources, you can do what you want. You can do ministry. And 100 years later, he's still ministering to me and to others as we can see these images. So, but what about the actual giving? I mean, we end up asking the question, how do we get them to give more? And we can get caught in this. We do want more money in those offering plates, but that question, how do we get them to give more, is really that same triangle between the people, the pastor with the people and their money, trying to get them to give more, to loosen up. One pastor said that at a board meeting, they had said, all we have to do to solve this budget problem is to get Susie to double the membership. So, have the pastor get more people in the pews so they can give more money. Another triangle related to getting them to give more comes from Robert Creech, who teaches at Truett Seminary in Waco. And he said that pastors are in a triangle with their people and, put God over here, where the people say, Pastor, you tell us what God says about money, and then we'll decide whether we want to do it. or not. And I think there's another way to approach preaching, teaching, and encouraging giving than just trying to get them to give more. I think, I want to show you this triangle too that I think is related, which is comes from Larry Matthews' The Pastoral Triangle, where the pastor is in a triangle with the Little C church, this the real one we actually serve, and the pastor's ideal of church, the Big C church. And so pastors are constantly trying to will the Little C church into the Big C church. And in fact, that ends up being the burnout spot. And again, as with money, the task is to relate to the real life people as they are, their real life church, even with all their controlling or limited perspective on money or whatever it is. And then just keep saying, this is what I see. This is what I want for our life. I want us to have a sense of agency. I want us to have a sense that we have enough, or or whatever we are encouraging people toward, without being willful. Oh, let's see. I'll skip that. Okay. So you define self, and the pulpit is it's not the only place, but it is a great place to do it, because people expect to hear from the pulpit about giving at least once a year. I do think that one great way to define yourself around money is to tell your giving story and to share why you give. Joe Clifford is the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church of Dallas. And he says that one stewardship season he got up and he told his own story, how he began as a banker before he went into ministry, and he was given about $500 a year, which he thought was a lot, but then he realized he was really only giving 1%, and he made a commitment to move toward tithing. And he was very candid and said, some years we make it, and some years we don't. But my commitment is to do my best to give a tithe every year. And people came up to him afterwards and said, thank you for being so honest. When I was a pastor in Massachusetts, we used some stewardship program. I can't remember where it came from, someplace in Iowa. And this program strongly recommended that the pastor make his or her pledge public. And there was a lot of anxiety in our church about who knew who gave how much, and I just decided that I could tell my own secret. And it was, so I gave it as part of my stewardship message, and there was an audible gasp. And one woman told me afterwards that she took her pledge card, crossed out the number, and wrote a bigger one. And so giving did go up that year, and every year that I did that. However, the big benefit was that it freed me up, because they knew how much I gave. They knew I was putting my money where my mouth was. There was no more secret about that, and it gave me a lot more freedom in the pulpit. I think another thing you can do from the pulpit is, and in other settings, is to make requests. You're not trying to will people to give more, but you're asking. You say, I would love for us to reach this goal. I would love for you to consider percentage giving, and you won't get what you ask for, what you want, unless you ask for it. But it's critical to remember that it is not all about you, or not all up to you. For those of you who are pastors, it's important to share responsibility with other lay leaders. James Lampkin is pastor of Northside Drive Baptist Church in Atlanta, and he said he always tries to remember that he is, they say in his role as pastor, he is not chair of the stewardship committee. And so he actually lets them do their work, and when they ask him for input, he gives it. So he said once a year the stewardship letter sounded like it could have come from the symphony. And he suggested that maybe, in a Baptist church, the stewardship letter might, want to mention Jesus at some point, and they did change the letter. Another pastor, this was an Episcopal priest actually. I'm not sure this would happen in a Baptist church, but maybe. At one point, he was new to the church, fairly new, and the administrator came to him and said, we have $37 in our checking account. And he discovered that what his predecessor would do was when money was low, he would go around and he would get the money. He would go to people in the church or even people in the community and ask them to make up the shortfall. And he said, I'm not going to do that. And they had a congregational meeting the next Sunday. And he said, I just want you to know about this situation and, what can we do together to handle this problem. And, he didn't love all of the ideas, but they came from the congregation, and so they were able to embrace them fully. And they more than made up the gap. I mean, they actually had the best year ever after that sort of, real come to Jesus kind of meeting. I think another question about responsibility is, are you the biggest giver in your congregation? And I believe that in tithing, and I believe that pastors need to practice what they preach in giving. And at the same time, I know of one church where the pastor was a double-income family. They were both tithing, and when the pastor left, the church could no longer afford a full-time pastor. So it's important that the church be taking responsibility for its own finances and its future. And so it's just something to think about. So define self, share responsibility, and then get facts. And this is the question of who knows who gives what. And there are traditions like the Episcopal Church where the rector almost always knows who gives what. And in Baptist churches, that's much less common. But it's at least critical to know for the pastor and key lay leaders to know, what are the percentage of givers at each level? Is there one giver who's carrying the church, and more than the financial secretary needs to know about it? And if there's what are the trends in giving from one year to the next? Is it up? Is it down? And how are those changes taking place? Oops, there we go. And then we just need to talk about money more often, much more often. And this is a tremendous pastoral need because people deal with money every single day of their lives. And we give them very little help at church in knowing how to approach these critical life matters from the perspective of faith. Yes, giving is a part of that, but also just how do you make decisions about, spending money on your children or making a big purchase or the everyday little purchases. And I think if we just talk about it more often, people will get used to it. And it also doesn't put all the weight on that one stewardship sermon every year. I think we need to talk about money at a time when we're not asking people for money. And you all know about that Jesus talked more about money than just about any other topic. And in relating to giving, we also need to manage our own anxiety. I love this image because it always makes my heart pound fast to read "Don't Panic" in bright red. And I think this is a better attitude, this sort of a serene approach. I think that anxiety is a key component in how stewardship works in the life of the church, that anxious leaders just cannot raise as much money as people who are relatively calm, have that sense, as Stacy said that there is enough. And so our own anxiety, it doesn't mean we have to calm people down, but we just manage ourselves and have that bottom line sense of trust that, that we can handle it, that God will take care of us, no matter what happens in this particular campaign or, in our church life course. So I want to invite you now to think for yourself for a moment about why you give. I'm going to cut it down. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to write about why you give. I give because. Right, that's 1 minute, and I'd love to hear from a few of you about why you give. You can click the hand to raise your hand. I do see, I think it's John who says, because God gives. Thanks so much for sharing that. That's certainly true. So somebody else, I'd love to hear. I always find this one of the most inspiring parts, to hear why people give.
I also have a comment from Thelma, and Thelma says, I give because God has blessed me with much.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Thelma. Anybody else?
One more from George. Okay. I give because I believe in the church, and I believe that my gift makes a difference.
All right. Thanks, George. Thanks so much. All right, finally, I want to talk about enough celebration. I think that we know how to celebrate. This is Easter Sunday at the Grand Canyon, and here's Easter Sunday in a local church. So we do a pretty good job on Easter of celebrating. But I think we could do so much more. We could celebrate so much more often. And it's something for myself I'm seeking to cultivate as a spiritual practice, to celebrate as much as I can every single day. And, I think we can celebrate our givers by simply saying thank you a lot more than we do. And, whether by a written thank you or just overall celebrating in worship at the end of the pledge campaign. We can say thank you for those who pledge, and we can celebrate their results. And I think there are many things in church life that we can celebrate. Whatever your church situation. So this is the First Baptist Church in America, an urban church. And here's a West Union Baptist Church. It's in West Virginia. Whatever your church situation, even if you're facing challenges as we've heard today, your church probably has more money now than it did 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And if your church is less than 100 years old, you have way more money than you did 100 years ago. That's something to celebrate. You can celebrate that your vision is bigger than your resources. And if your vision isn't bigger than your resources, your vision isn't big enough. Because it's the vision that gives us the motivation to find ways to get those resources so we can carry it out. And we can celebrate our family story in relation to money. So every family has its unique story about money, and you've got your own story. But if your family raised you enough so you could be on this webinar today, they did more right than wrong. They got you fed, and clothes, and somehow you got educated and got yourself into ministry. And so you can be grateful for those who provided for you. We learn from our families those first lessons about money. And so as I'm going to conclude the formal part of this webinar soon, and we'll have some time for conversation afterwards. But I want to tell you a little bit about my dad. So this is my dad. Last month, he turned 91. And so this was his 91st birthday party. He's opening a box of Seeds candy that he's pretty happy about. My dad is incredibly frugal, and that used to really annoy me a lot, how he would never spend money that he had, and he would give me things that he picked up for free here and there, a book or a magazine or a pencil, and for some reason that really got on my nerves. And one day he was going to give me a basket of, it was a 4th of July basket, and it had a patriotic windsock and a red, white, and blue tea towel and a candle. And I was getting ready to go to the airport, and I just didn't want it. And he said, "Here." And I realized in just a moment that my father shows me love by giving me things he's gotten for free. So I've learned to celebrate his generosity. And I was visiting him the other day. He lives near me in assisted living now, and he said, "Here." And he had a package of lime green tubular hangers and 3 bars of Dial soap and a jar of pickles, and then he rummaged around in his freezer and he gave me some ice cream bars. And he handed them to me, and I said, "Thank you." So I celebrate my father and his frugality. He doesn't spend his money, so now he has enough to take care of him and for the rest of his life. And I celebrate my parents' generosity, as they gave actually a double tithe for many years. So as we cultivate the practice of celebration, I think it can change our relationship, not with our families, but also with our congregations. So I want to invite you one more time to write. I'll give you just 60 seconds again, to write about something in your church, whatever is going on right now, but something that you celebrate about your church. And I'll just give you about 1 minute to write about that. All right, that's 1 minute, and I would love to hear from some of you about something that you celebrate about your church.
We have one question from Douglas, or one comment. He says, "Our congregation is growing little by little."
Okay, that's something to celebrate. Thank you. All right, somebody else?
This is Stacy again.
Yeah.
Margaret.
Yeah.
We celebrate just the diversity in our church of the many gifts that people bring. the many ways in which their giving gets expressed, and I'm
Yeah.
very grateful for all of them.
We also have
Great.
a comment from Alex who says, I celebrate the warm reception visitors receive.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Alex. All right, well, one more little exercise I'd like to invite you to do, and that is to think about what we've done over the last hour and something that you've discovered about yourself, or rediscovered. I discovered that the second I, is important. I relearned that I, and an intention, something that you intend to do or want to do. So I am going to give you 2 minutes to write about that, just to reflect on what you've learned and what you want to do. All right, that's 2 minutes, and again, I'd love to hear from a few of you about what you've been learning and what you intend.
Hi, Margaret.
Yes.
This is John. I'm Patty's husband.
Okay.
I appreciate this seminar. It's been very timely for us, and I have a meeting this evening, as a matter of fact, with our deacons, and this has become quite an issue for us. And it's what I'm intending to do is to talk with them in a positive way about this, is because it's been kind of negative recently, and talking positively about why we give to the church, and encouraging people to maybe share some of their stories, and having that maybe on a regular basis for some time, so that I think people will be encouraged to share in some of the celebrations in that way. That's sort of what I would be hoping for.
Okay,
That's what
great.
we're intending to do. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Is there somebody else?
It looks like Alex has a comment. Alex, I've unmuted you.
Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, so 4 things quickly. I discovered that my giving doesn't have to be a secret. You gave the comparison of matters of secret very often, and so that's true. But I don't have to. I can tell my own secrets. I like that line. I learned that I actually have greater agency. When I say agency, the ability to act is what I mean. Greater agency when my giving is robust, because it just means I don't have to be ashamed of what I'm doing, because it's significant, at least in our lives. I intend to. I actually wrote that down because I intend to challenge the congregation to give of schedule and skill, not just sustenance this year. So, the preoccupation is on the money, and that's true, but the time and the skill, the time and the talent is also a piece in there. And then I want to point giving at vision and not just salary. So in telling my own secrets, I didn't get on the webinar for this today, but I think I'm probably, you give me like 30 seconds to encourage my fellow clergy people who are, muddling through in the wake of Easter with that high number you got, and it's not so high anymore. So just in prayer, the Lord put it on my heart to step away from a salaried position. I'm still a senior pastor, but to let go of salary for a matter of a month. It's actually from Easter to Easter. So Easter this year to Easter next year. We let go of salary. The Lord told me in the dark, and I didn't tell my wife. We were sitting at the table. My wife said the day of Easter dinner, she said, "You know what you ought to do?" And and so we prayed, and I sweated, wrote it up, took it to the board meeting. I was ready to present it, and I balked. I did not say anything in the meeting. Went home, minutes typed, but the Lord wouldn't leave me alone, and neither would my wife. So I'm back on it, and yesterday I stood and looked our board in the face and told them I'm going a year without a salary. Now there's a backstory to that, but the bottom line is, just from yesterday to today, I feel more free, not more encumbered. So I hope that encourages you.
All right. Okay. Thanks so much, Alex. Stewardship. And the last image, well, look, this is, I'm grateful to ABC USA for so much, and for sponsoring this webinar, and to each of you for being part of it. And then I want to leave you with this image, and with a quote from Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk. "He who thinks that he has finished is finished." And I would add, she who thinks that she has finished is finished. So in the ministry of stewardship and in our relationship with money, none of us are finished. We're still learning and growing, and I love this image as a representation of that growth.
Margaret, thank you so much for the webinar today. I know I learned a lot, and I have my own idea of some things that I intend to do, as well as just appreciate some of the perspective that you gave that I think helps calm us as pastors to say we are not entirely responsible for the success of our congregations financially. That is a relief. And so grateful to you for everything that you brought to us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
This is Stacy again, ABC Stewardship Facilitator. If you could go to our website, generousdisciples.org, there will be a way to access this webinar from there, as well as Bridget and I are working on updating our website. But please also find that there will be, a generosity newsletter there that you can sign up for, as well as other resources. So we're hoping that will continue to be a great resource for our ABC churches.